Hello, everyone. I don't want to postpone the beginning of this event as a respect for those who are here on time. Thank you all for being here with us. My name is Sasha Pavlović. I work at the Institute for Philosophy and Social Theory from Belgrade. I am one of the researchers of the Serbian team within NTA framework, and I will be a moderator of this event. That is, I will try to squeeze you all to keep into your 15 minutes presentations or 5 to 10 minutes discussion. During the framework of NTA, which is basically a short for European Non-Territorial Autonomy Network, it is one coast project gathering dozens of scholars from practically all European countries. A number of regional authors wrote about various autonomy arrangements, about various minorities, about Serbia. And as NTA is coming to its end, we wanted to gather some of the authors like Tamas Korhec, Ljubica Đorđević, Katinka Beretka, and Jelena Čeriman to present briefly their findings, so things that they researched on in the past few years. This event also includes several other people. We have two representatives from minorities themselves, like, let's say, independent intellectuals, at least in that role. Belgin Kamberi from Albanian minority, and Mark Lošonc from Hungarian minority in Serbia. We have Ragmi Mustafi, who is basically the president of the National Council for Albanian minority in Serbia. We have Milica Rodić from OEBS Office for National Minorities, and Daniela Ristovski, who is independent advisor at Commissioner for Protection of Equality, Republic of Serbia. We have Adrian Borka from the Secretary for Minorities from Vojvodina. So thank you all for participating. Our idea is basically to briefly hear the authors, then to have discussant commenting on what they see and if they have some comments. And we are particularly interested to hear from the minority representatives and officials. What do you see as maybe unexplored topics or something that would be beneficial for you in the future? Where could research be directed? So I kindly ask representatives from minority councils and Serbian institutions to inform me whether through your comments or later on in an email or anything, if you find this useful. If so, we can provide summary and minutes from this event and maybe even develop it in some form of a small analysis or a policy brief on these issues. So I'm glad that everyone is here. I thank representatives of institutions, and I guess we can proceed. So the main goal of this webinar is to discuss and compare the effects of two national councils in Serbia and in their effectiveness in protecting minority rights. Since the 2000 overthrow of Slobodan Milošević's autocratic regime, Serbia made several important laws in protection of its minorities. Both Albanians in Kosovo and Hungarians in Vojvodina enjoyed a great deal of autonomy during the socialist Yugoslavia, and then with the Milošević's rise to power, these rights were basically abolished. Now, Hungarians responded in, let's say, more cooperative way, opting for restitution of some autonomy for Vojvodina, and also some elements of autonomy for Hungarians in the personal sense, in the cultural, in the territorial. During Milošević's rule, there was no real intent to make legislation that will actually recognize these rights. Some changes occurred after 2000. In 2002, there were two important laws adopted in Serbia, which enabled Hungarian National Council to be formed. However, full ratification of this law waited for, I don't know, 7, 8 years afterwards. And there were various obstacles in implementation. And even nowadays, some things are in practice maybe hard to achieve for the Hungarian minority. I will not talk in length about this because we have several papers that cover specifically this topic. And it should be said that the most developed national council in Serbia is the Hungarian National Council. Hungarians are by far the largest national minority in Serbia. And also this has been a subject of serious scholarship. We will have Tamas Korhec and Katinka Beretka, I think, talking specifically about this. When it comes to, I can also say a little bit about funding. National councils enjoy, at least on paper, great autonomy in terms of education and culture, and they receive certain funding from the state. I don't have the latest data. I think in 2018, that's the freshest I got. It was around 707,000 euros from the Serbian budget. They're also allowed to receive funding from, let's say, other countries, in this case, Hungary, and Hungarian contribution exceeds the one that they receive from the Serbian budget. And a lot of scholars tend to agree that this has been a positive development, that national councils maybe even offer some kind of a blueprint for resolving ethnic issues in the wider sense of Central and Eastern Europe. Others pointed out that there still are some obstacles, but I think it is safe to say that there is a rising positive trend in Serbian-Hungarian relations, both within in Serbia and in bilateral relations between Serbia and Hungary. It's even became a proverbial brotherhood between Orban and Vučić. However, as this Hungarian National Council has been studied and is the largest and the best known, there are actually 20 national councils in Serbia, and others are by no means developed to the same extent as the Hungarian one. So there is a lot of sense in actually, when we talk about national councils, looking into how the situation is like with the other councils. And Albanian is one of those that has been, at least to my knowledge, far less researched. Albanian story is a very different one. Albanians in Kosovo responded to the abolishment of Kosovo autonomy by basically forming parallel institutions, so denying all cooperation. They proclaimed that they want to be independent, and after conflict and war in the late 1990s, they first conditionally and then fully proclaimed their independence. However, for those who are not experts in this part of the region, Albanians are not limited only to the territory of Kosovo. And within Serbia proper at the moment, Albanians live as minority in 3 municipalities in the south of Serbia. They are majority in 2 of them, in Prešov and Bujanovac, and they are significant minority in the 3rd, which is Medveđa. Initially, in the late 1990s, Albanians from these 3 municipalities also wanted to proclaim independence, and they had some even, let's say, there were some military formations close to the Kosovo Liberation Army, so they wanted to be perceived as part of the Kosovo issue. However, after 2000, situation changed. So from potentially violent and to some extent violent, at least we are avoiding direct violence. There has been some cooperation. However, again, the situation is quite different. Albanians boycotted the population census from 2011. Therefore, because these national councils are measured to some extent by size and receive funding from, the size that they occupy. Therefore, officially speaking, there are only 5,800 Albanians in Serbia. So those who are officially counted. However, the proper size of Albanian minority is probably 10 times bigger. And if I got my data right, in the first or at least the last elections for the National Council, there was far more those voting that they're actually counted as being citizens by population census in Serbia. And I think the largest turnout I could record is at the parliamentary elections in 2018, where we had some 26,000 Albanian votes in the Serbian elections. So this can give you, more than 5 times more people voted than they are actually counted. So this gives you some idea about certain contradictions in the Albanian minority and the formation of Albanian National Council. I don't know what kind of funding you receive. I don't know whether that's matched by Albania in any way, and I would like to find out. In any case, data are lacking in this respect. So to conclude, this is what we would like to cover now and in the future, compare some national councils and see what is being good, but also where there are room for improvement. I would say that the ethnic distance between Serbs and Albanians is far greater still than between Serbs and Hungarians. Serbian officials, some of them, not all, occasionally use derogatory terms for Albanians, and Albanian National Council even try to lead a legal fight, at least to try to prevent these things happening in the public discourse. And to my knowledge, they were partially successful, but lately quite unsuccessful because there were some different rulings of the court. So this can give you an idea about generally national councils in Serbia and about two minorities with a very different status, very different relation to Belgrade, and two national councils with very, let's say, different ambitions. I think in one case, we still need to lessen the ethnic distance and to promote cooperation. In another case, we have something achieved and we can go on to try to pursue all the legal means that are available for minorities. I'm sorry if I talk too much. I will give floor to Tamas Korhec, who will talk about legal aspects of national councils in Serbia.
Hello to everyone. Thank you, Alexander, for this introduction. I hope that the webinar today will contribute to the discourse around national councils. I would like to present parts of my researches that were published in this volume, because the time limits make it impossible to be complete in this respect. I would like to begin my my participation with the reminder. I would like to remind you that the national councils in Serbia were legalized before 20 years. So we have a kind of anniversary, because in year 2002, the National Assembly of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia enacted the law on the protection of the rights and freedoms of national minorities. And this legislative act made the possibility to elect to establish national councils. I was one of the participants in this process. I was eyewitness of this process. And I would like to remind you that this achievement about the collective right to self-governance and the establishment of national council were possible because of the agreement between political parties participating in DOS coalition, which overturned the Milosevic regime that time. So there was an agreement between the ruling Serbian political parties that time and the political parties of national minorities, primarily Hungarian, but Bosniak and also Croat minority parties who were part of the DOS coalition. So this was a kind of compromise between these two sides. And the Serbian ruling political parties accepted the idea of collective rights and non-territorial autonomy to be legalized, while the national minority political parties had a kind of success because they were able to legalize some of the elements of their political programs. So in this respect, this was where we have an agreement. The title of my presentation is Agreement and Disagreement, or Agreement or Disagreement, because despite of the fact that we have this kind of compromise and this kind of agreement between the political elites, there are several things in which the motivations differed, and there were no real consensus about the content of this non-territorial autonomy and the motivation. On one hand, the Serbian ruling political parties were motivated by the intention to demonstrate that the Serbia, the post-Milosevic Serbia, has very different attitude toward human rights and minority rights and toward the ethnic equality. So it was a good step to demonstrate in international community that this Serbia is different and it's ready to accept several claims from the side of national minorities. And I have to remind you that the enactment of this law made possible our membership in the Council of Europe in a large extent. On the other side, the national minority political parties really wish to have a strong institution that will make possible a kind of power sharing between the state and the national communities. So autonomy institutions, the self-governance, the national councils were intended to be strong public institutions with strong legitimacy and strong competences in order to share the power of the state between the central government and institutions controlled and established by minority communities. I prepared a presentation as well, so I can also share it with you. So in this respect, we can say that there were two conceptions behind national minority councils. From the side of minorities, it should be a self-government, like local self-governments, with powers and strong democratic legitimacy. On the other side, the Serbian ruling political parties had an idea about national councils more as a consultative bodies. So not real kind of public institutions, but more consultative bodies and not really with strong powers and legitimacy. So this was something what can be qualified as disagreement. So if we analyze the last 20 years and the evolvement of the legal framework, we can spot this kind of discrepancy, this kind of disagreement about the real content of the self-governance, the real content of what are national councils at the end. So during my researches, I identified some enduring dilemmas, open issues related to the non-territorial autonomy and national councils in Serbia, which have, so on one side, basis on the legal framework, and on the other side, in the practice and the policies towards national minority councils. The first is that we had no answer to the question, are national councils public or private institutions? Are national councils a kind of NGOs, consultative NGOs with special status, or real elected bodies with public powers? And various legal acts, various legislative acts are giving answer in different ways to this dilemma. One part of them are going into the direction that they are democratically elected public bodies. Other parts are really limiting the self-governance to consultation. The second issue is that the framework, the legal framework for non-territorial autonomy in Serbia is the same for unequal communities. Unequal communities with very different status in the state, with very different institutions. So in this respect, it is not differentiating between the national minorities in Serbia. And the third unresolved issue, which is coming back and it's open still, are the political parties and their role inside of national minority councils, and the democracy model functioning within the work of national councils. From the beginning, when we were working on the legal framework and various legal acts, there were conflicting ideas about what should be the role of political parties in the work of national councils, what should be the role of political parties in the process of elections. So there were some intellectuals, some NGOs, which were favoring solutions which excludes political parties, including minority political parties in election process. Despite of these ideas, generally, we can conclude that political parties of national minorities are very actively present in the electoral process and in the work of national councils, but we also can say that even the Serbian political parties, mainly the ruling political parties, are also participating indirectly in elections for national councils. What can we also say that in these direct elections for the Hungarian and Albanian national minority councils, we had till now in these direct elections from 2010 participation of more than one political party or political organization, but we have also a kind of decrease in the participation of registered voters. So it is something which is influencing the legitimacy of these elected national councils.
5 minutes.
Okay. Political parties in national minority councils, my thesis is that it's absolutely natural and normal that political parties and political organizations are interested and motivated to take part elections for national minority councils and to participate and manage the work of national minority councils. Here I put some arguments why it is absolutely normal and natural that they are interested and they will participate directly or indirectly. But what is open to me as a question that what kind of democratic model should be implemented in national minority councils? Because in democratic theory, theory of democracy, we have various models of democracy. And what is for me a thing what is a problem, that in almost all national councils, we have a practice that we have the so-called winner takes it all principle applied in the work of national councils. And this is the so-called Westminster type democracy in which the majority is ruling exclusively. So if you apply it to the national councils, it means that you have an outbidding of opposition, and simply the opposition is excluded from the decision making. And it is good for the ruling political parties because through some institutions, primarily in media, they can influence very much the public opinion, because the minority language media is often established, and the founding rights are in the hands of national councils, and they are using it, the majority is using these founding rights to have a so-called friendly media. It's the same thing like in the case of Serbia with public broadcasting companies. So the ruling political parties wish to have public broadcasting media very friendly to ruling political parties and neglecting the plurality of the political life. We have this situation also in national councils often. And the end, some possible legislative steps, amendments, which might, in a way, motivating the plurality in democracy in national minority councils, to go into direction of the consensus democracy within national councils, that national councils really protects the interests and rights of all members of the minority and not only to the majority within the minority. Some of these solutions might be that all lists should to have some legal solution which will impose that all lists should participate in the distributions of positions within national minority councils, or to have simply obligation to have consensus in some decisions. So some decisions should be necessarily voted by the representatives of all lists. Of course, such solutions need also mechanisms to overcome some eventual blockades in the work of national councils. Another solution might be that in the electoral process, which is now the so-called simplified proportional systems with party lists, to have the possibility to also vote for the candidates on the list individually. This may have the effect that the elected members of the national councils had a kind of more freedom to decide and not exclusively according to the mandates from the political parties. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Tamas. Clear arguments, impeccable timing. I'm very grateful as a moderator for this. Now we have a little bit of situation. Our discussant, Belgzim Kamberi, has some personal business that he cannot postpone. So I would like to invite him to provide a very, very brief comments from his part. Belgzim, as I understand, will talk in Serbian, and this is the only case. I know that most of us understand Serbian, but since this is a recorded event that should be made available for NTAN participants throughout, let's hear Belgzim, and then I will make notes and just provide a very, very brief summary in English. Belgzim, because we do it, repeatedly, I kindly ask you to try to limit your comments for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Saša. Hvala svima. Nadam da se čujem.
We hear you very well.
Znači, prvo izvinjavam što trebam da pričam srpski, ali lako mi je. Ja bih krenuo u tom malo kratko socioistorijsko, kako je rekao i prethodni predavač ovde, da kad je kreiran ideja model nacionalnih saveta za manjina, ona je suštinska ideja je bila nekako da se pravi nekak model kulturno autonomije. Kulturno autonomije za nacionalne manjine, koje u suštinu je bio ideja reformske politike tadašnje post-Miloševićeve vlade 2002. I nadalje posle. Ali mislim da ima, što se tiče albanske nacionalne saveti, ima nekakva 2-3 dimenzije koji bi ja pričao danas, koji bi dokazuje da nekakav taj model nacionalnih savetima nije dovoljno. Prvo, ako izgledamo na pozitivnom kontekstu, i to vidimo ovdje da je i predsjednik Nacionalnih saveta Albanac, koji mislim da će pričati više o tehničke i detaljima, vidimo da Nacionalni savet Albanaca je mogao neke stvari da gura i da rešavaju, na primjer što se tiče tekstovima i knjigama u školu, u osnovnu školu. Ali to što taj primjer dokazuje najbolje da ne možemo da napredujemo i u razvoj nacionalnih savet, ni u manjinske pravima u Srbiju, ako to ne vidimo i na nekom širim kontekstu. I kad pričamo o širim kontekstu, ja mislim da prvo treba da se gleda na unutrašnjem poredak Republike Srbije. I u tom kontekstu imamo prvi problem zakonodavstva. Zato što kao svi znate ovdje zakon o manjinama i u ljudskim pravima 2002. Iako je nekako se upoređivao sa evropskim standardima, on još danas nije još upoređivan ni sa sam Ustav Republike Srbije. I ja dajem...
Mogu molim te da te zamolim, ja nema šanse da ovo sve uhvatim, da probam sad da sumiram ovo što si do sada rekao.
Ajde.
Izvini. Okay. When National Council idea was put forward, it was made from the perspective of cultural autonomy, to secure cultural autonomy, and that was the achievement of a reformist post-Milosevic political parties in Serbia. When it comes to Albanian National Council, there are several things that I want to point out that show that this National Council model is just not enough. First, Albanian National Council showed that this model can be useful in some areas, for example, in securing textbooks, providing that textbooks in Albanian are used, but it also shows that in some other areas it's insufficient. And that, in my view, follows from the wider context. We need to refer to the wider context of the Serbian laws in general. And the 2002 Serbian law on minorities, which is the seminal one here, is insufficient and is even not in line with the Serbian constitution itself. Okay?
Hvala. To prvo, mislim da ne možemo da pričamo samo o kulturnim autonomije, ako ne pričamo malo i o samoupravljanju. I u tom kontekstu mislim da je problematično da, znači, model nacionalnih saveta manjina ne može biti dovoljno sa ovom centralističkom republikom. I u tom kontekstu, ako gledamo, na primjer, koje su nadležnosti i koje su delatnosti gdje može da deluje nacionalni savjeti manjinama, to vidi se da nije dovoljno da manjine živi bolje u širom kontekstu. To je prva stvar. Tako da ne treba zaboraviti da opštinama gdje su mešovite stanovništvo i u celom Srbiju nema nikakve nadležnosti. I u tom kontekstu to ima uticaj i na sam prave manjina. Prvo, da ne pričamo o regionalnom vlašću. Na primjer, to što u Srbiju se zove okrugi, koje nema nikakve nadležnosti također. Tako da mi imamo uglavnom imamo samo centralnu vlast. I paralelno tu imate nacionalne savete manjina koji imaju nadležnosti u samo 4 oblastima kulture. I to, zbog toga sam hteo da kažem da bez nekakvog decentralizacije, ne na teritorijalnom, ne pričam na teritorijalnom kriterijumu, ma čak ni na etničkom, nego na decentralizacije na nadležnostima. Ne možemo da čekamo da imamo napredovanje prave manjina.
Hvala. Are you finishing? Okay. Hoćeš da završiš?
Ba, imam još kratko, ali ako možeš to, pa posle završit ću sa treću dimenziju.
So another problem that we need is self-governance. In addition, so we cannot just have a cultural autonomy, and without self-governance, the whole situation and national councils cannot really work well within a centralist form of rule. If you look at the jurisdiction of municipalities, we see that it's insufficient, that municipalities do not have real autonomy, so thereby minorities living with them are also deprived of this. So we cannot have central governance and national councils work parallelly in just 4 aspects. What is really required is decentralization in general, giving more authority to local self-governance in order to promote this issue of rights for national minorities.
And regional, i okrugima.
Local and regional, on the local and regional level, okay?
I treći aspekt što sam teo, i tu mislim da Aleksandar Saša na početak na svoj uvod je pričao o tome, da naravno da svaka manjina ima i svoje posebnosti u odnosima sa državom. I naravno da kad pričamo o albanske manjine i odnosima i države Srbije i Republike Srbije, to su posebno odnosi zbog srpsko-albanske odnosi i još više zbog kosovskog pitanja. I u tom kontekstu mislim da to je jedan dokaz da teško je razvijeti nacionalni savjet manjinama ako prvo nemamo dobre bilateralne odnosi između matične države manjina i republike, administrativnu republiku gdje živi manjinama, kao je, na primjer, Republika Srbija, ali čak to nekad put nije dovoljno. Zašto mi možemo da vidimo da danas Republika Albanija ima malo bolje odnose sa Republike Srbije, ali to je nedovoljno, na primjer, da se reši nekako suštinske pitanje manjinama. na primjer, i u tom odnosi između Republike Albanije i Srbije, koji su danas malo bolje, to nije bio dovoljno da se reši na problem legalizacije za albanske zastave u Srbiji, koji je to jedno lako pitanje samo promenjene zakon o nacionalnim manjinama i koji garantuje Ustav Republike Srbije. To je prvo. I drugo, to je dokaz da ne možemo da pričamo o kulturnoj autonomiji bez tog pomirenja, regionalno pomirenje i političke konotacije. Zašto? Ja sam pričao malo pre o tekstovima u školama, ali se vidi da iako zakon to omogućava, ne može da se reši problem tekstove istorije i geografije zbog današnje odnosi između Srbije i Albanije, odnosno današnje odnos između Srbije i Kosova. Tako da ja bi završio sa tome da bi rekao da ako hoćemo da razvijemo nacionalni savete manjina, ja mislim da mora nekako to da se šire sa zakonske promjene i čak i sa ustavne promjene. Drugo, ja mislim da to ne može ako nemamo prvo. Nema ni razvoj demokratizacije zemlje. Zato što ne možete vi da se čeka da nacionalne savjeti manjina i sam manjine da ima više društvene koezije sa većinama, ako mu tom vlastu imate danas ministar unutrašnje poslove koji je u sudca predsjednik nacionalne savjet manjinama za širenje govor mržnje preko manjina. Tako da to daje nekako ni sam manjinska zajednica posle nema povjerenje u nacionalni savez, zato što vidi da oni ne može da zaustavlja to, a čak da pričamo o lojalnost prema državu kad ministar priča tako institucionalizuje takav mržnju govora prema zajednicu. Tako je da ja bi završio za to. Ja mislim, ako nemamo tog, prvo to da ustavni i zakonodavstvi poredak Srbije, prvo, i to što sam pričao o nekakvom više samoupravljanje i na lokalnom i na regionalnom nivou. I treće, ako nemamo pomirenje i dobre regionalne odnosi i bilateralne odnosi, teško je da se čeka da sa ovom model nacionalne savjeti manjinama i kulturne autonomije, tako kako su jeste danas, teško je da čekamo ne samo integracije manjinama, nego još manje da se čeka nekakav društvena koezija ili kako se kaže da se pravi neka multietništva društvo. Zašto na kraju krajeva, ako gledamo faktičnu situaciju danas i u parlament Republike i u svima institucijama, od kad imamo kreiranje manjinske nacionalni savjet, nije da centralne institucije su više multietnični, ali što je lošije nije da socijalna koezija između različite etničnosti u Republiku je bolja nego što je bila.
Brazime, I need to...
Tako da ja završio bi sa toga. Izvini, Sofia.
Hvala, thank you. Okay, I will basically, he summarized his points in this last part. So the third thing that I wanted to emphasize is that each ethnicity has its specific relation to the state and some specificities. And for Albanians, there is the Kosovo issue that is a lot responsible for this specific relation. It is hard to develop national councils without good bilateral relations and good regional relations. So it is not enough, the situation at the moment. There was some improvement between Albania and it's improvement in relation between Albania within Serbia, but without the mother state improvement with the relation with mother state, that cannot be overall improvement. No cultural autonomy can be achieved without reconciliation in the region, and this regional dimensions is essential. So without bilateral relations, other things cannot move forward. For example, texts for textbooks, references from history, geography cannot be resolved without the wider resolution of the bilateral relations between Serbs and Albanians. So if we want to develop Albanian national councils, we need to have this wider changes and even constitutional changes to some extent. And we cannot allow to have Serbian ministers using hate speech. We cannot have situations where these things cannot be, cannot have satisfactorily legal resolution within Serbia, because if members of national minorities see that their national councils cannot effectively resolve this issue, it undermines their confidence in the national councils itself. So these are the three main points that are needed in the wider sense: regional cooperation, bilateral relations, increased self-governance in order for the national councils to be effective. Thank you. Thank you, Belzim. I tried as best to appropriate his words. Our next presenter is Ljubica Đorđević, and her paper is entitled Systematic and Evidence-Based Monitoring of the Work of National Minority Councils. Ljubica, please, the floor is yours. You have 15 minutes.
Thank you, Sasha. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation from Institute for Philosophy and Social Theory. And thank you for having me here today. And I'm glad that also see many familiar faces today. So my brief presentation will be actually something what I also presented in the Anton conference, second Anton conference in Budapest last year. And this is the idea I'm promoting ever since, also with the Serbian stakeholders, which essentially is focused on the need to systematically monitor the work of national minority councils. This idea comes from several points, and also from something what Sasha mentioned in his introduction. First thing is that although the theory of national non-territorial autonomy is flourishing since the mid of 90s, we essentially lack much of the data about how these different mechanisms throughout Europe works. So for us as researchers, there is also a need to focus more on how these mechanisms work in practice, and whether all these let's say positive aspects which we point out in our theoretical consideration are really so in the practice. So this is just a more general framework or more general need to focus more into the functioning of these various models of non-territorial autonomy compared to the really wide range of theoretical arrangement analysis of non-territorial models. This is the first point. The second point is what Alexander, you also mentioned in your introductory remark. You mentioned something about funding Albanian National Minority Council and how you couldn't find the data. And this is actually one of the core, let's say, motives for me advocating that we should have more data available on how actually national minority councils function, what are their good points, or what they have managed to achieve in their functioning, what are the problems, what are the issues for the bad or good functioning, and so on and so forth. And this is something what is so strikingly missing in Serbia too, as elsewhere in Europe more or less, but I'm focused today on Serbia. So we really need more data to be possible, to be able to assess the functioning of national minority councils, because most of our statements are based on our assumptions on our impressions and so on and so forth. So more data is needed in order to justify also our qualitative, let's say, qualitative assumptions. And thirdly, there in Serbia, there have been research, has been not only research, but some specific research or analysis of functioning of national minority councils. Just to name the provincial ombudsman research in early 2010s, then research of the Regional Center for Regionalism, ombudsman, and so on and so forth. So they are here and there. So ad hoc, mostly project-driven research-based analysis of actual functioning of national minority councils. But what we miss is actually systematic approach to this, and that we have like steadily available reporting and monitoring of the work of national minority councils. And this is something what I'm advocating for. Also in the context of the action plan for the realization of the rights of national minorities. You know, this is part of the Serbian accession to the EU under Chapter 23. And there is, under the auspices of the Ministry for Human and Minority Rights, Serbia should actually, or the ministry should take the monitor how this action plan has been implemented. And bearing in mind the role national minority councils play in the enjoyment of national minority rights and also into the implementation of the action plan, I think that national minority councils should be also inevitably included in this kind of regular reporting and monitoring, which hasn't been done so neatly in the past. Now we are in the process of waiting a new action plan for national minorities to be adopted. It has been delayed for the moment, but this is also maybe the opportunity to set this, let's say, reporting and monitoring activity into a more regular basis. It is also interesting that, for example, Serbia, we don't have this practice, as it is the case in some other countries, of regular annual reporting of the ministry in charge of minority rights. Now it is Ministry for Human and Minority Rights, of reporting of the standard of human and minority rights or minority rights. We have annual reporting by the Equality Commissioner and Ombudsman on an annual basis. We can discuss how is it, what is the feedback from the parliament, and whether we really have regular parliamentary debates over the developments of and the status of minority rights. But we miss, and with this is something we should also explore, the obligation for the ministry to report to the parliament about the state of minority rights on an annual basis, and really to have a comprehensive debate, parliamentary debate about the status of human and minority rights, or only minority rights, and so on and so forth. So this is some kind of framework in which actually we should aim for the change of the Serbian system in terms of really tracking the record of how national minority councils operate, and in the second round, actually, what is the real situation of minority persons belonging to minority in Serbia. Unfortunately, I could only preparing for this presentation today, I took a glance into the Hungarian and Albanian national minorities because they are in the focus, or minority councils today. And Hungarian national minority has internet web site, mostly in Hungarian. Some information are there in pieces of information there are also in Serbian. And I couldn't find no annual reports or reports. I don't speak Hungarian, so excuse my knowledge. I could only go to it with some Google Translate, which is there. I could find some strategic documents, decisions of the minority council. I'm not sure, but this is under big disclaimer that I don't speak Hungarian and couldn't follow all the website, so I couldn't find reports whatsoever. Could be in Hungarian. In Serbian, the data are very scarce. And this is also a question we should also discuss: to what extent national minority councils should be open also to the majority population, and in terms of what information should be available also in Serbian, notwithstanding all the rights to use of own language and so on and so forth. When it comes to the Albanian National Minority and Minority Council, if Google is correct, I couldn't find an internet site. So I was Google and trying to find website of the Albanian Minority Council. I couldn't find any. So I couldn't find any information of the work of Albanian Minority Council. So let's say through this, maybe there is a Facebook group, or I don't know how, but Ragmi Mustafa is here. So maybe we can discuss it later, how how you engage into public communication with public and disseminating your activities. So I also have just for a few minutes, I have I can share also my screen here, because I have presentation, but I will not go in details. I hope you can see it. So just to say,
6 more minutes.
Sorry?
You have 6 more minutes.
6 more minutes. Okay, good. And then I'm fine also here. So what I think are the core areas for, okay, so what I'm advocating here is why actually, I try to explain why it is necessary. I think that it should be a combination of qualitative and quantitative indicators. And I think that first and foremost, it should be done by national minority councils. So because it is also part of autonomy, that it shouldn't be someone else who does a lot of monitoring and reporting about your work, but this is actually something like is self-driven as some kind of regular monitoring of your work, that you know where the strengths, where the weaknesses, and of course it's where the problem is with the capacity of national minority councils. And Tamas also rightly explained and noticed that among 23 national minority councils, they are of different demographical strengths, different political mobilization and organization, different capacities, and so on and so forth. So in some instances, the problems in functioning is in the capacity of minority itself or national minority council. But in many instances, actually problem is with the decision-making authorities, with the ministries or provincial authorities or local authorities. And then if you say we have submitted so-and-so, I know, proposals and so-and-so suggestions, but they ended in no results because of this and this, then we can clearly demonstrate that there is also this communication issue with the state authority or public authorities, and that the weaknesses in the system actually lie not only within the capacities of national minorities, but also in the readiness of decision makers to adopt minority-friendly policies and decisions. Then it's obviously the Ministry for Human and Minority Rights who needs then to aggravate this, and especially in the context of Chapter 23. Civil society and research, we do such kind of ad hoc monitoring, but the thing is that actually it is usually project driven and so on and so forth. What are the risks? Risks are insufficient human capacities. I know that some minorities, but generally national minority councils lack the problem of human resources in terms of it costs money to have employees, and then who will write another more report, annual report or so. It could be obstruction for both minority councils and state authorities, because when you really face where the difficulties, then this is the problem, the issue why stakeholders are not always keen to monitoring. Then it is something what we can see also in existing reporting, but also elsewhere in Europe. It is formalization of the process in terms that you put something together in okay, 2 minutes, I see. You put a report together just for mechanical reasons to meet the criteria or the need to quasi monitor, and but in the end it lacks substance. This is something what we can see in some of the accurate reporting generally, also in Serbia, when it comes to narrative reports, a lack of data, or just focused on the legislative framework without actually content on or focus on the real situation in practice. And okay, I can share, but this is time is up. I have developed some methodology of parameters and competencies and so on and so forth, but I will stop here. I just hope that the possibility that this new turnus of action plan, which is, I hope, soon to be adopted, which screams for adoption of the methodology for monitoring, will also bring a change in this monitoring, also when it comes to process, but also actors and methodology. And we can use this opportunity also to make more focus on on the performance of national minority councils, not to control them. The purpose is not to control national minority councils, but actually to empower them and to help them to overcome some of the difficulties they have been facing in the past. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ljubica. We had first paper on how we could improve legislation in terms of national councils and actually make them more democratic. We had now Ljubica's paper about monitoring, and our next presenter is Katinka Beretka, and she will talk about strategic planning in the context of Hungarian National Council, so it blends nicely together. We will hear Katinka and Jelena, and then we will have a short break before Mark has a second discussant and our officials make some comments. And of course, I open the floor for others. So please bear in mind, Katinka and Jelena, and then we will have a much deserved break.
Thank you, Sasha. I hope that you can hear me. And I would like also to share my PPT. Yeah, so I would like to welcome everybody and thank you for the opportunity. Partially, I was presenting this research this year in Constanța on our third conference, but today I would like to put the focus on the strategic planning as such, as a minority-driven activity, and why it is important, how it can help to fulfill the loopholes in the legislation. So the main issues that govern my research are listed in this slide. First of all, whether minority councils need strategy at all. If the answer is positive, then the next question is whether they have capacity to draft their own strategies and also to implement them in practice. Then whether it is a separate competence or public authorization in Serbia in the legislation, so whether the Serbian legislator puts any obligation on the councils to have such strategies, and why the Hungarian Minority Council is special in this regard. Today, I do not want to go into details about my favorite part, and this is the linguistic rights strategy of the Hungarian Minority Council, but I would like to use this strategy as an example, as a positive example, how a minority council can act beyond the law, but again, within the legal framework. So the first question, whether minority councils need strategies, and yes, of course, they need, like any state body or even the private sector. Here you can read a quotation from Professor Korhetz, who said that the professional strategic planning is one of the fundamentals of effective and successful policy making and good governance generally. So it would mean that strategy making is not a minority specific or a group specific activity, but it is a precondition of good governance in general. And it is a tool by and upon which problems might be systematically resolved and public interest protected. So in accordance with this quotation, but also I think that in accordance with any clear mind, we can conclude that such approach to activity, such strategic approach to activity can be seen as a precondition of a successful functioning within the minority council. However, the question is, we could hear before whether minority councils have capacities to have their own strategies. So not some standardized strategies or general strategies adopted at central level, but such minority specific strategies that were drafted by the competent persons within the community. And of course, it raises the question of human resources, budgetary resources, technical opportunities. So the next question, whether the minority councils can have their own strategies. There was a research conducted by the state ombudsperson, the protector of citizens, between 2014 and 2018, that was dealing with strategy making by the councils. And in this period, only 7 or 8 national minority councils adopted a cultural and a media strategy. You can read their names here. And only the Hungarian Council had a strategy for education and official use of language. As far as you know, the law on national minority councils prescribes the obligation of the minority councils to have their own strategies in field of culture and media. However, this obligation doesn't exist in the other 2 fields of activity. So somewhere it is logical that the minority councils adopted their strategies where they were required for. Still, the Hungarian Council was the only one that was dealing with the other 2 areas. Here you can see the Bosnian and the Ruthenian Council because they developed a comprehensive strategy for all 4 areas. And also the Albanian Council is in breaks because as far as I know, there is a separate strategy, like again, as a comprehensive strategy for all 4 areas, but it was adopted in 2020, as I'm right. So it was beyond the research frame. And also the Croatian Minority Council that adopted its language rights strategy last year. So they are in breaks because they were not covered by the ombudsperson's research. However, in general, we can say that strategy making is not in accordance with the everyday activity of the minority councils. What is somewhere a result of the fact that they are very different, and which difference is also justify their various performances. not only the already mentioned internal factors, but also the external factors, just to mention the good relationship with the kin state, or even the existence of the kin state, because in realization of a strategy, the kin state can have very important role, especially like a financier. So why the Hungarian Minority Council is special, besides that it adopted the it has adopted strategies for the 4 main areas, that the Hungarian Council also adopted 4 other strategies in the period in the period of the first mandate, so between 2010 and 2014. As you can see here, there were strategies for the NGO sector, for the adults training and lifelong learning, for science, and also an action plan for demography and family support. You can see that each strategy were adopted during the presidency of Professor Korhet, so during the first mandate. It was a very intense period of strategic planning and making. However, they are midterm strategies, so they are already set aside. And there were adopted only 2 more strategies later on for education and for the official use of languages. Currently, there is only 1 strategy within the Hungarian Minority Council that is valid, and this is the strategy for official use of the Hungarian language adopted last year. So we can see that there was a very intense activity from the Hungarian Minority Council side in the beginning, when they saw the importance of strategic planning. However, today the procedure is a little bit slower. What is the reason behind? Because reasons are always there. First of all, the Constitutional Court, when annulled the certain number of provisions of the law on the national minority councils, among others, it said that the minority councils cannot act beyond the Constitution. So they should act only in 4 areas that are listed, enumerated in the Constitution itself by numerous clauses. So the minority councils can act only in field of education, culture, information, and official use of languages. And the Hungarian Minority Council interpreted this ruling like that they also cannot have their strategies beyond this framework. So the decision was to integrate the programs of the NGO, the adult training and science strategy into the 4 remaining other strategies. So the cultural strategy was dealing with some NGO issues. The educational strategy was dealing with lifelong learning and science. And also the Minority Council entrusted the implementation of the demography action plan to an NGO. So somewhere it was the official reason and explanation, but also there was a change in the political organization of the council itself and its internal organization. So their approach to the future plans was somewhere different. Each strategy follows the same structure. So it means that they have very detailed situation assessment, not only a description of laws and statistics, but also there are certain researches and practical experiences in accordance with which the strategic goals are defined, and of course in the end the strategic programs. But instead of a simple description of a project, there are actors, indicators of success, the necessary budget, the time frame in which the project should be finished, and also the competent person who should supervise the implementation of the strategies. Actually, the supervision is always entrusted to the Minority Council. So, but you will see the implementation of the strategy, especially when we are talking about the linguistic rights strategy, but it was the same, for example, for the educational strategy as well. there are a lot of actors who are involved into the realization of the strategy. So why this approach is better than to have only a comprehensive strategy dealing with all other, or dealing with the four main areas? Actually, you will have a very detailed starting point for each area with certain figures, numbers, reports, etc. That will help the actors to know from where to where they would like to move on. I don't want to talk about the strategies in details, as I said. Into the elaboration of the first linguistic rights strategy, I was personally involved, and we were asked to focus exclusively on the official use of the language. So within the authorization of the Minority Council from the law. So each program and goal were defined within the official use of the Hungarian language. There were certain translation projects, informational campaigns, and also within the strategy goal to help a powerful enforcement of the language rights by Hungarian, we managed the free legal aid program. That time, everything was covered by the council's budget from the state. So there were no external sources. Still, in the second linguistic rights strategy that is currently in force, and that was adopted last year, has adopted a much broader context of language rights. So there are certain programs that are indirectly connected to language rights, like capacity building in schools, or certain cultural programs, educational programs. You can see that there is a strategy goal called Language and Diaspora, where Hungarian language is not spoken at all. So it would be very hard to talk about the official use of the language. Also, there is a separate goal devoted to language and science, and only one goal, state and citizens, deals exclusively with the official use of the Hungarian language. So this yeah?
2 minutes.
Yeah, I'm ready. So what is the problem with this approach, and what is the good in this approach? The first one could be implemented by much simpler formula, because in the realization, the council could rely on its employees' help. It was much cheaper, and it could be copied by any other minority council, even with less capacity. Still, in the second case, some projects and some programs need structural changes, urban capacity building, for example, or institutional changes. That is much more expensive, and what would mean a need for cooperation with the NGOs, with the institutions on the field, with the field actors. So in that context, the National Minority Council should be an umbrella organization, dividing the resources, giving some instructions. And I really think that it is beyond the capacity of almost any other minority council. So it doesn't mean that the second strategy is bad, just it has adopted a different approach. And for the end, what is the condition of a successful strategy planning? First of all, that the goals should be defined by consensus in the society, because the implementation depends not only on the intersectorial cooperation within the state, but also on the very competent persons in the community who feel responsible to participate in the implementation. Of course, money is always welcome. However, there are very simple projects that can help a lot in the field, and which implementation depends only on the council or only on the persons belonging to that minority. So I really think that the condition of success is raising the awareness of the minority members. And thank you.
Köszönöm. Thank you, Katinka. And our last presenter before the short break is Jelena Tjeliman, and she will tell us something about can national councils actually promote participation of women, political participation? Jelena?
Thank you, Sasha. I'm so glad I'm here with you all today, and I will present ongoing research. Actually, it is supported by NTAN short-term scientific mission activities, and it started in June this year and included interviews with experts working in the field of national minority issues in Hungary and Serbia. So the main question of this research is to what extent councils in Serbia actually fulfill the goals inherent in their establishment. Concretely, to what extent they addressing intersectional questions to ensure effective participation in public life and decision-making of women from minorities, national minorities, as well as to what extent they support their integration into wider society, both integration of persons and issues they raise. I will present three main points from this research. And the first one is when it comes to the active participation of women within councils in Serbia, well, they are facing almost the same obstacles as in any other political institutions here. Just as well as within councils themselves. Data obtained from an interview with experts in the field, working in the field in Serbia, indicates that although the legal framework stipulates that every third person on the list for membership in the councils should be a woman, actually the process of constitution, very often these women push towards decision not to get involved in the work of the councils, so they are often replaced by the next person on the list, who is often a man. And I will quote interview with that expert. Even when they are in leadership positions, since council members are mostly elected from among members of political parties, women follow the policies of the party they belong to and work with the approval of the party president, who is always a man. According to the expert, the Hungarian and Slovak actually councils are rare in the sense that women are in leadership positions and also active in decision-making processes within these councils, contrary to some other councils in Serbia. So this expert says, the voice of strong and competent women is stifled by male-led politics, most often connected with stereotypical conservative view of position of women in society, which is prevalent in southern, eastern, and southwestern Serbia. The situation is quite different with the councils consist of minorities who live in Vojvodina. So the Hungarian council has an almost equal number of men and women in its membership, with women occupying many leadership positions, such as the vice president of this council and women heads of different boards within it. It is similar in the Slovak council, which is actually led by a woman, which is not the case in many other councils in Serbia. The second point connected with this, or a question rather, is how well representatives of national minorities represent interests of minority groups and women within these minority groups. What is their accountability to the constituencies, the minority groups itself, and minorities within minorities? Connected with this is also significant to say how well actually, for example, young women or women with disabilities or women from rural areas but belong to national minorities, how well actually are they familiar with the existence and functioning of the councils, and are they motivated for election of its members? And this is the question of internal pluralism, actually, colleague Tamas Korhec also spoke about today. Internal pluralism means that the diverse voices and interests of an individual group are capable of being voiced, rather than merely the interests of the largest and most influential members of a particular minority, in order to ensure that these representatives are truly seen as advocates of national minorities and are accountable to the minority groups whose interests they represent. So this would mean not only visits to different areas where members of a certain minority live, which is common practice of our councils, in order for them to familiarize with problems of the community, issues, concerns, ideas, or needs, but also the point is to implement continuous research, and the methodology of which would include members of the national minority who are multiple, marginalized, and underrepresented, which is actually not a common practice of councils in Serbia. Maybe again, Hungarian council is a good example because they had a research conducted with the aim of more effective work with youth, but youth in general, not, for example, girls from rural areas or similar issues. Third point is about competencies and knowledge about gender equality among the members of the councils. And at this moment, experts feel that the national minority issues are dominant one, general national minority issues. And that members of councils lacking in knowledge and sensitivity towards mainstreaming trends and requirements when it comes to gender issues. So maybe this is the time for the first recommendations gathered directly from experts. And for example, they say that mid-term development strategies and action plans developed by some councils in Serbia should address the issue of gender equality directly and include girls and women from rural areas affected with multiple marginalization in creation of these documents. Also, planning of effective gender inclusive budgeting is also important for the implementation of activities they plan, which includes the necessity of awareness and competencies for that area, as well as public powers over the allocation of public funding, which is also an important issue previous speakers spoke about. In addition, the inclusion of persons belonging to national minorities in parliamentary committees, mainstream political parties, as well as in public administration, can serve as opportunities to incorporate gender issues into the affairs of conventional governmental and political bodies, as well as to increase awareness of the existence of national minorities, actually minorities within minorities. So maybe more women in leadership position and women in real power position should be also one of the recommendations from this research. So I think I'm on time, and I will give floor to you, Sasha, and thank you all for your further question and reactions.
Thank you, Jelena. I'm grateful to all presenters. You all kept to the time. We exceeded the original timetable because Belgzim provided his comments earlier. I will now offer very short 10-minute break. This is the end of the first and the more academic part of this webinar, of this event. Short 10-minute break. Then we come back. We will hear Mark, and I invite then interventions from all officials, Ragmi and others, and also from the audience, and we will finish promptly at 2:30. So I'm coming back in 1:45. You have 11 minutes for, just to relax and to digest digest what was said so far. Thank you so much. Thank you all for still being with us. Before I give floor to the officials, I would like to ask Mark Loshans to speak from the perspective of a member of a Hungarian minority and tell us how he thinks about these national councils and how what does he think about these presentations that we heard.
Hello, everyone. First of all, let me say that I was very happy when my colleague Alexander Pavlovich started researching the parallels and differences between the Hungarian and Albanian communities in Serbia, Yugoslavia a few years ago. On the one hand, because I believe that although in many respects minority consciousness is much more developed than it was decades ago, I feel that interethnic relations, especially comparative awareness of them, are extremely underdeveloped. It is still to be seen, for example, what kind of cooperation there was between Hungarian and Albanian politicians in the early 1990s. Information on this is more likely to come from in-depth interviews than from studies, or how the dynamics of the Hungarian community and the Albanian community were related. For example, the boycott of Albanians once contributed greatly to the electoral success of the Hungarian community. Or, for example, Hungarian politicians often use the example of Kosovo to argue their case. These should be analyzed one day. And now let me respond briefly to what has been said, briefly, as Sasha asked. What I liked most about Tamás Korhetz's presentation, and I know that this attitude is reflected in his writing, is that he focused on enduring dilemmas and tensions, emphasizing that this is a malleable, complex, dynamic institution. I found point 3 particularly intriguing: political inside or outside the National Minority Council. This is an interesting question from a political historical point of view as well, since we know that when the debates around autonomy were taking place in the early 1990s, the question arose how to preserve political pluralism and meaningful democratization alongside institutional unity. I mention this because this is perhaps one of the most pressing questions to date, as the Hungarian National Council in practice reflects the will of a single party, or more accurately, party elite, that of the Alliance of Vojvodina Hungarians. And National Minority Council meetings are procedural in nature, with substantive debates and choices between real dilemmas being very rare. I think this is very important. It is very important that Tamás Korhetz has explained precisely what formal institutional proposals he would make in order to increase the polyphony of opinions, political pluralism, and diversity of views. I am left with only one question: how, by what methods, by what struggle could these proposals be implemented and applied? What Bergzim Kamberi said is very important. In the early 1990s, when there were discussions about Hungarian autonomy in Vojvodina, it was often suggested that autonomy should have a strong economic dimension, and it was even suggested, for example, that there should be hospitals operating within the framework of autonomy. Today, we often forget this and talk about cultural autonomy as a matter of course, without mentioning the other possible dimensions of autonomy. But I think that this would not be very realistic in an ethnic context, and even the Hungarian community is too small. So I think that from a Hungarian point of view, in terms of decentralization, we should talk about the status of Vojvodina. There has been talk of the need for some constitutional changes to establish Albanian national councils. I wonder what exactly this refers to. As regards Ljubica Đorđević's presentation, I think it was very important that she talked about the fact that while theory was and is flourishing, it is essential to talk about the issues of application and practice. This is undoubtedly a burning issue within the Hungarian community in Vojvodina. For example, it has very often happened that the opposition has been very vehement in criticizing the various practices of the Alliance of Vojvodina Hungarians, but even the most ardent opposition members have rarely done the work of knowledge acquisition and criticism in this regard. Criticisms often remained ad hoc and unsystematic, and this should not be blamed on a lack, just on the lack of transparency. We don't know, for example, exactly how fairly the resources are allocated or what exactly is being done with the money that is being allocated. These are just few examples. So what Ljubica Đorđević said about knowledge of performance and substantial impact is also a burning issue in the concrete political field. It was said that monitoring should be self-driven. A similar question came to mind as in Tamás Korhetz's presentation, in the case of Tamás Korhetz's presentation. How should we get this self-driven instinct to kick in? Could it be stimulated in a formal, legal, institutional way? I found Katinka Beretka's presentation very exciting, as I felt that in the last years, the Hungarian National Council's activities are not really bound by the aspects set out in the strategy documents. I found the comparison and contrast between the two strategies very convincing. I would like to ask, what is the risk that strategy 2, namely the one that focuses on the wider context and is more expensive, will not be implemented in a verifiable way, but being too general, will have little accountability for those who seek to implement it. In other words, is strategy 2 so general in its wording that critics will never be able to point out specific points that have not been implemented? With regard to Jelena Keriman's intervention, I would like to say that in general, as far as the relationship between women and Hungarians in Vojvodina is concerned, we have noticed an interesting phenomenon in recent years. Women have appeared in the Hungarian public discourse in Vojvodina as objects of attention, and there are even researchers who are specifically concerned with femininity. For example, Kristina Rácz, another Hungarian staff member of our institute, who has researched, for example, the role of women in the anti-war movements of the 1990s, Petra Bakos, a Hungarian from Vojvodina who works at the gender department of CEU, and finally, Karolina Lendák-Kabok, a successful researcher on issues such as the relationship between women, minority women and science. I would especially like to highlight the volume called Üvegplafon, Glass Ceiling, edited by Karolina, whose authors are Hungarian women from Vojvodina who wrote essays about what it means to be a Hungarian woman in Vojvodina today. It is a painful shortcoming, however, that the same dialogue has not been initiated with regard to public engagement and public functions, nor has a similar awareness raising and sensitization been initiated. Rather, it is typical that Hungarians in Vojvodina speculate about which women have significant informal influence despite male dominance. And I am very glad that Jelena has presented her research and insights on this. An important step has been taken to fill a gap. If Jelena would like to talk about it, I would like to hear more what other institutional changes she would suggest, in addition to raising awareness to better address the issue of minorities within minorities. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, Mark. I will give the opportunity for the presenters to respond to any direct questions towards the end. Ragmi Mustafi, president of the Albanian National Council, or official National Council of Albanian Minority in Serbia. I'm shortening it. Ragmi, thank you for being with us. I hope this is useful. If you could comment on some or any aspect of this, any thoughts on this, and especially if you find this useful, and if you would like to, for us to do some more analysis in the future, I would be more welcome to hear.
Hello to everyone. Hello, Sasha. Thank you for inviting me in this conference. It's quite interesting hearing this presentation as well as from these studies. I will have some kind of presentation expertise, but I will tell my experience to the Albanian National Minority Council, which is quite different when I read or hear some kind of expertise to that. We have to keep in mind, because in 2018 has come to the change of law on national minority councils, and that had several provisions which cut out the competencies of national minorities. And you don't have any more competencies, you have just a public authorization, which is quite a low level of administrating the national council. And the changes of the law has come as part of depolitization of national councils. I don't know if hearing me, somebody, I'm talking just to myself. And what is quite of interesting in that depolitization, I can say that out of 23 national minority councils, only 4 are not part of progressive party. In one hand, it's been like president of political national minority political organization cannot be in head of a national minority council, and the other part that the members of progressive party have been as well as part of the election of national minority councils. Albanian national minority councils every year gets 100,000 euro for its function. So it's quite a low level of budget to exercise the administration and low budget to implement any project. Thankfully, with the cooperation with the OSCE and other organizations, we have come to have the comprehensive strategy in 2019, which addresses education, culture, the official use of language and scripts, as well as the media. We should have in mind, because national minorities that are part in Vojvodina, in autonomous Pokrajinska Vojvodina, is quite differently from the national minorities that are in south of Belgrade. You have just 4 national minority seats or offices that are part in Bujanovac, in Novi Pazar, in Bosilegrad, and I think in Čačaguan. All other national minorities are in Vojvodina. Why? Because it's quite a different treatment of national minorities by the state. You have in Vojvodina the autonomous government, which has quite a different treatment to national minorities, and because we don't have this level of addressing our concerns and our challenges, we go directly to the government. And in this part, when it comes to the centralization of state, has come to the excluding the national minority being part of decision-making process for culture, for education as well. For example, I gave out of 15 opinion to the school principals, in which just in one case took seriously by the Ministry of Education. And on the other hand, when I got the fund for textbooks from Kosovo, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Education have come with the public declaration, which he says like, I have politicized the schools. We just brought the textbooks free for children. But even though in action plan for national minorities, we raise it all the time, the concern, because it doesn't address our challenges. It haven't addressed our challenge till now, and that's why it comes to the provision of action plan. And there will be new action plan which should address our concerns and our challenges and problems. For example, at the time we didn't have no textbooks for elementary school. And it was not part of the action plan how to solve it. As well as one of the main problems I see, for example, in media, with the strategy of privatization of media, you have just TV Vojvodina and RTS as a public service, but you don't have like local media or which are funded from the public, or for example, when our media organization do apply in Ministry of Culture, 80% of time they don't get the funding. So I will try to summarize it as much as I can, but I see the contradiction or conflict between the constitutional law provisions, protection of the rights and freedom of national minorities, and the law of National Council of National Minorities, as well as the definition of National Council, which is contrary to the concept of minority self-government, and as well as I mentioned, the competences and public authorization and the relationship between the Republican bodies and municipality authorities, and do the framework of national minority address the problems and challenges of national minorities in this time? Do they have these capability and ability to do that? Do they have the funding capacity for that? Are very much in question. For example, I will give 2 words, if I may, and I hopefully, if every one of you has any question to whatsoever, I will be glad to answer. What I was saying is that the politicization of national minorities has come more and more to be part of central government and not to exploit or to address the real needs of national minorities, especially in the south of Belgrade. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's open for interventions. And I can generally open the floor. Is anyone interested in commenting or asking a question? Okay. We have Milica Rodic from National Program Officer from OEBS Office for National Minorities. Milica, please do. Thank you for being with us, and please do share your thoughts. And after her, I will give word to Adrian Borka from the Vojvodina Secretariat for Minorities.
Thank you very much for having me here today and for inviting me on this event. First of all, I apologize if I look like a protected witness. That's because I'm in the office, so the reflection is a bit odd. I'm grateful that we have interest of academic community in this topic. Personally and also professionally, the mission is involved in national minority issues, integration of national minorities, but also integration of diverse societies for a quite long time. And I would say that this is one of the most important programs of our mission. However, it is important to have academic angle because it is widely lacking hearing of academic opinion and view about these issues. It is also important to have involvement of academic community in policy-making process. And also taking into account recommendations that are evidence and research-based. So thank you all for showing the interest in this topic, and I really hope that your voice will be heard also elsewhere, especially in the positions where decisions are made. It is very interesting selection of communities and national minority councils, given all the differences that both communities and both councils are experiencing, also historical differences, cultural differences, political influences and differences, etc. I know that from 2010, when the first Albanian National Minority Council was established, that colleagues from Hungarian community, and namely it was then Tamas Korhec, who was then heading Hungarian NMC, was helping in a very friendly and professional way, then formed Albanian NMC to develop their capacities and to be more efficient in their work. And I also know that colleagues from two NMCs are in this part of partnership, and that the Hungarian NMC is very helpful when it comes to work of Albanian NMC, and this is very important in terms of capacity building. Lot of very useful and interesting insights I could hear from you. I would just overview, I will just pick one from each speaker. I would say also that policies are done in favor of bigger NMCs, and they're basically minority among 20, now it will be 23 NMCs after elections that are scheduled for November 13th, because we have also Gorani community who are registered as a national minority, plus we have Federation of Jewish Municipalities. And Mr. Korhets mentioned that the sentence equal framework for unequal communities. Unfortunately, we are lacking research on the functioning of NMCs. And as I said, policies are done mainly through involvement of those bigger, most sound and most influential NMCs who are representing bigger communities. And obviously that those smaller NMCs have been voiced out. And unlike in 2015, when the first action plan on national minorities have been drafted, now we have, I would say, 6 NMCs who were actively participating in the process out of 22 NMCs. So it shows also maybe to some extent distrust of those smaller NMCs in the entire process, and also maybe lack of confidence that their issues and their concerns could be addressed with such important and strategic document. It would be also very useful to have research. We had actually one research dated from 2019 that was done by Protector of Citizens with a mission support about the work of NMCs from periods from 2018 and to 2014-18. So basically, there are like plenty of recommendations which are still valid. Unfortunately, nobody is working in order to address those recommendations, and also to help NMCs to be more open and efficient in their work. So many of the issues that also you addressed as a problem are also addressed in those recommendations. Unfortunately, those recommendations remained, unused, at least so far. It is also very important to have data, as Ljubica also mentioned. I would just give an example, because now we are in the process of drafting of the second action plan on national minorities. If you had opportunity to read this document, you will see that majority of proposed measures and activities do not have a baseline. So somebody could have impression that this is the first time that Republic of Serbia started dealing with issues pertaining to national minorities. So there are no data, not only from the ministry or ministries, but also CSOs have sparse data. And also quite often, I mean, you researcher being yourself, you know that also CSOs do not have that capacity to produce research which would provide with concrete data and results, measures, and recommendations.
4 minutes maximum.
Okay, I would also just mention that we as a mission, we have offered our support to the Ministry of Human and Minority Rights in order to make this monitoring and reporting process on the implementation of this document more sustainable and efficient. So I hope that they will accept our suggestion and our in-kind and in-house support in providing the tool which will help in monitoring and reporting of implementation of action plans. It is also what Ms. Beretka mentioned, importance of strategic documents. This is also what we learned through direct communication with our colleagues from other NMCs. However, it is issue of capacity, how many NMCs actually have capacities to develop, but also to implement these strategic documents, and just to provide updated data that it is not only Hungarian NMC, but also Albanian NMC have a very good and evidence-based strategic document with nicely developed action plan, and some of these very important issues have been tackled. Sorry, Ragni, you don't promote yourself, but I have to do instead. I would just mention one important among many other activities that were addressed through this document, which is a catalog of the most common Albanian names and surnames, loosely connected to use of languages and scripts. And with this, actually, Albanian community started dealing with some of the issues that were present for decades. So kudos to Albanian National Minority Councils. And one more just comment on gender roles in national minority councils. I think that this is a problem not only from the perspective of outsiders, meaning belonging or not belonging to certain communities, but this is also a problem in the issue of so-called insiders, because national minority councils perceive only issues treating citizens as national minorities. Thus, certain issues remained neglected. And I would just focus on gender and also youth-related issues, because this is also, I would say, a result of position of women and also youth within communities and national minority councils. If they're also more prominent, I would say that those issues would also be more prominent in the work of national minority councils. So this would be all from my side, at least for now.
Thank you, Milica. This was very, very useful for me as a researcher. I'm particularly grateful. Adrian Borka, Adrian, please, if you could do it in 5 minutes, I would greatly appreciate it. So we have a little bit of time for general comments.
Hello to everybody. I'm very glad to have a chance to be today with you. You cannot see my face because camera is not working these days. I don't know the problem, but I hope you can hear me. I would like to reflect a little bit of at everything that my colleagues said. For example, Mr. Mustafi said about different development and treatment of minorities and national councils in Vojvodina and rest of Serbia. Well, I would like to find a reason for that. Maybe one of the reasons is existence of provincial government and how we deal with minority and minority councils in the Vojvodina. As you may know, we have a minority tradition here at this territory after the Second World War. It declines, of course, during the 90s, but we get back after the 2000s. And we have a government and we have a secretariat, which is my secretariat, which are dealing with national councils and national minorities. We have 17 national minorities which have seats here in Vojvodina. And we have 4 colleagues, for example, which are dealing with some of national councils. So, for example, we are not dealing with everybody. We are divided because we have to know what are the goals, what are the achievements, what are the wishes for some specific national councils, because they have some of them some similar goals, some similar wishes, but we have to know what are the differences between national minorities and councils. So for example, we have one colleague which he's dealing only with Hungarian National Council as the biggest one, and for me, example, I'm dealing with Romanian, Slovakian, Montenegrin, Ukrainian. And what is good in this everyday work with national councils, we speak their languages. We address them in their languages. If we don't know their languages, we have the whole service for translation and dealing with them in their languages. And that's very good because, you know, they have another approach in dealing with everyday problems and dealing with that. I would like to reflect regarding what Ljubica said. Yes, we miss some facts, some complete facts. We have partial facts. For example, we have very precise facts regarding financing National Council of National Minorities. We are working every year and at information regarding financing national councils, and we are informing provincial government regarding that. For example, this year we had like almost 70,000 euros for all the minority councils in Vojvodina, divided in 17, of course. And it's different, of course, regarding the how big is the minority which council represents, but we have that precise data. We have precise data regarding the official use of languages, and we have precise data regarding education in languages of national minority, but we don't have everything complete in one place, in one report, in one information. And I think that that's a good suggestion that the Ministry for Minority Rights, Human Rights and Social Dialogue should have one big report regarding the status of minority rights in some year. I wanted to say regarding what Professor Kor had said. Yes, it's very natural that you have a political impact in the work of national councils. And it's obviously you cannot exclude the political impact. But I think, from my opinion, it's my personal opinion, that it's not so good if the political impact controls the national councils totally. So you have to have some like rational balance or rational measure to which extent you are like politically influenced, but you have in the first place, what I think is the purpose of National Minority Council is to hear your people, your minority, what they want. And if they are like satisfied with your work, everyday work, which reflects on their everyday life, I think that is the most important thing. It's very hard to find that measure and that proportion because the political influence is obvious, and it's not so easy to not to be influential by politics. I wanted to say that we are working at the action plan, as Milica said, the new action plan we had in August last meeting of the working group, and that plan is not, the work is not done, so everybody can look at that draft document and suggest some new ideas. But what is most important is also the census, which we have during the October. So we have to have a campaign for people which belongs to national minorities to declare themselves. And after that, we have the election for National Minority Councils, 13 November this year. So it is very important that people declare themselves as national minorities. And after that, we will select these bodies again. So we will see the politics in the future regarding these bodies. But for me, it's very pity if we have these bodies only as a consultative bodies. We have to have them like more bodies which decides regarding their national minorities. So we in the provincial secretariat, we always consult, we always hear national councils of national minorities regarding education, official use of language. And it's very unfortunately that we don't have all the national councils of national minorities at the same level of development as, for example, Hungarian national minority councils. For example, we see Katinka showed us that we have some councils that don't have any strategies. So that's very, very, very sad. And I would like to ask and to call that the national councils to work a little bit more active, because nobody can replace them in their work with their national minorities. So I wanted just this to comment, and I wish you all the best luck in your everyday work. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Very useful, practical points. Would Daniela Ristovski maybe like to say something on behalf of the Commissioner for Protection of Equality? Okay. If
yes.
Hello,
everybody. I was just raising the hand.
5 minutes.
Thank you, Alexander. Thank you, all the researchers, for today's presentation. As you already heard, I'm coming from the Office of the Commissioner for Protection of Equality of the Republic of Serbia. And I will just make a short comment about today's topics from the perspective of an equality body. As you are all aware, probably, Commissioner for the Protection of Equality is an independent state institution, actually a central institution with the main task to prevent all forms of discrimination and also to protect the equality of both natural persons and legal entities in all spheres of social relations. When it comes to equality protection in Serbia, according to our practice, national affiliation or ethnic origin is one of the most common grounds of discrimination during the entire period of institution work. So basically for the last 12 years, it has been in the top 5 grounds. For example, during the last year, a total of 96 complaints were filed due to discrimination based on national affiliation. And the majority of these complaints, as in previous years, was actually filed due to discrimination of Roma national minority, around 80%. Regarding the frequency of submission, complaints from the Bosniak national minority followed, then the Hungarian, Croatian, Slovakian, Romanian, and then other national minorities. Most of these complaints relate to the area of public sphere, then proceedings of public authorities, then field of labor and employment, also in providing public services, education, and others. Let me say that findings and conclusions that we have heard today from today's presentations, and especially the topic that Ms. Chairman was presenting, are quite in line with some recommendation Commissioner has issued over the years regarding to improvement the position of national minorities in Serbia. For instance, in our regular annual report that we are submitting to a National Assembly every year, Commissioner gave recommendation to public authorities that all necessary measures should be taken so that staff composition of government bodies, local self-government units, and other public institutions should correspond to the ethnic structure of population living in that particular territory, and also to take measures aimed at managing the national, ethnic, religious, language, and other diversity. Also, Commissioner has issued recommendations to all self-governments to take measures and activities within its jurisdiction, of course, to ensure the inclusion and encouragement of equal representation of women and men in all spheres of political and public decision-making. Also, a similar recommendation has been issued to the National Assembly when it comes to forming parliamentary bodies and different types of parliamentary delegations. At the end, I would like to reflect on our collaboration with national minority councils and to say that over the years, the Commissioner has been organizing a set of trainings on anti-discrimination legislation and as well about mechanisms for protection against discrimination tailor-made for national minority councils or their members. But having in mind that upcoming elections for national minority councils, Commissioner will definitely proceed with these activities in the future as well. We find that national minority councils are a very important partner in combating discrimination. They are addressing to the Commissioner and they are filing complaints against discrimination, but we feel that they aren't actually using this mechanism of protection against discrimination in its full capacity. And we hope that this will change in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. We have 6 more minutes. Does anyone from the general audience like to ask a quick question? Okay, if not, does any of the original presenters from the first panel, you can have literally 1 minute just if you have something immediate to share or to respond to.
Well, the way how you say it is just if you have like better who has to come.
Okay. Okay, I was a bit strict. I like, you know, the Aristotle says a story is something that has a beginning, a middle, and the end, and I like to keep things compact and respect the time of presenters and the audience as well. I hope that you will share my views. I think this was an interesting event where we managed to blend various groups of participants, general audience, minority representatives, representatives of minority councils, from official institutions and scholars. And as you can see, we try to combine and to make comparison between two various different ethnic minorities and different national councils. And this happens to be productive and interesting for everyone. We will edit and post this event online, so it will be available for NTAN scholars throughout the network. And we will surely keep in touch and continue our contacts for future research and hopefully do analysis that can have practical meaning and value for the members of national councils and for the institutions. I thank you all once again for your patience, for all being here, you know, until the end of the event, for keeping on time, for offering your candid views and your points in a timely manner. And I hope we will all see each other again. Ragmi, minute.
No. I just, I reason just clapped.
Just wanted to clap. Yeah. I saw one hand instead of two. Okay, well, in that sense, I clap you all and I thank you. And I hope we will see each other live in the future so we can discuss, you know, until, you know, we are all exhausted. Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you all. Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.